Today on the Bourbon Bites podcast, I'm sitting down with a group of friends and discussing the state of light whiskey in 2022. Plus, we'll be comparing Old Carter American whiskey versus Obtainium Light Whiskey. Hello everyone and welcome to the Bourbon Bites podcast. This week I am actually on vacation in the great state of Florida. So I'm actually going to release a archive episode of the podcast, if you will. So if you guys remember, a few months back I sat down with some friends from my local whiskey group, including our good friend Brandon, and recorded a series of podcasts on various topics. And this one that I'm about to share with you guys, I wasn't really sure if I was going to release or not. So listen, we had been hanging out all day. We had recorded 2 podcasts, one of which had all Hazmat over 140 proof whiskeys. And by this point, we were feeling a little toasty. So I apologize in advance for the hecticness of this podcast. But I thought this is the perfect time to share it with you guys because, like I said, I'm on vacation. I really don't have my recording equipment with me. But I do feel like we had some really great conversations during the recording of this podcast, and hopefully you can appreciate it for that beyond the bit of chaos that surrounds it. But without further ado, please enjoy Cliffy and Brandy and the rest of the gang discussing the state of light whiskey and American whiskey in 2022. I'm here again with my friends from Southern California. We are welcoming Brandon/Brandy. It's Brandy at this point.
Woo-woo!
Brandy's here. I'm a smart idiot on Instagram. We have Juan.
Whiskey Padawan.
Whiskey Padawan on Instagram. And we have Aaron Artina, who is Whiskey Pear on Instagram. We have the crew here. I'm glad to be back with these guys to do another whiskey round table. So previously you've heard us doing some flights. We did a blind flight. We did a flight of Jack Daniel's Coy Hill. If y'all missed those podcasts, make sure to check out those replays. But tonight, Brandon has brought some very, very special bottles here to share with us. So one of these, Brandon's a little upset about.
I'm not upset about it.
Because
sharing.
If y'all missed it, there was a blind flight on my channel where we tried this whiskey along with some Obtainiums, and this whiskey didn't do so well.
It did very well. It just didn't come in first. There's a difference.
Or second.
It came in second. I don't remember actually.
It came like third. So we are bringing back the Old Carter American Batch 6. We did this one in a flight on my channel. It did not do well, but I'm glad to try it on its own. However, we're not trying it on its own. We're trying it with an Obtainium. There's a light whiskey here that is 15 years old. This one is 71.1% ABV. I have a feeling this is one of the ones we did on that flight. However, that was blind. We're doing it with them revealed here tonight. We're just going to have a bit of a conversation on the state of American whiskey, because I know these guys are fans of American whiskey, as am I. So we're going to talk a little bit, like it's 2022 now. You know, we went through the pandemic. We went through the bourbon boom, which is perhaps still happening. We don't know. But we're going to drink some American whiskey tonight and talk a little bit about where we think it's at. So before we get into this conversation, we're going to do a fresh cork pop here of this Obtainium that Brandon brought for us. So Brandon, will you do the honors?
I will. Thank you very much, sir. Cheers all.
The fun thing about American and light whiskey is that it's
Old.
It unlike bourbon, it doesn't go into a freshly charred oak cask. It's typically second fill bourbon.
Right. Yep.
So both of these whiskeys were they did not enter the barrel into fresh oak.
Yeah, so American whiskey and light whiskey have both kind of shot up in popularity over the past, I would say a year back from now. I think it started really popping up. I mean, I'll give credit where credit's due. Cat's Eye Distillery with Obtainium, Old Carter with their American whiskeys. Light whiskeys really kind of gained popularity, and I'm still trying to figure out like what that entails for a light whiskey. And I'm very thankful for Brandon sharing this Old Carter and the Obtainium, which I have a few bottles at home, and he has one here tonight. So we're gonna do a little bit of a deep dive in terms of the state of American whiskey. Like we're looking at it from perspective. We know the bourbon bubble is increasing very, very drastically. It's hard to get the bottles we want, and I feel like light whiskey and American whiskey have not really boomed in a way that bourbon and rye have. So I'm really curious to see, is light whiskey and American whiskey the way of the future for the next couple of years in American whiskey? What do you guys think, Brandon?
I'm kind of with you. Unfortunately, I think that is the future. But at the same time, is it going to catch on? Because Old Carter American is priced pretty high for MSRP in general, especially on secondary, it goes even higher. But there aren't that many companies that are doing a light whiskey or American whiskey to begin with. Especially one like Obtainium that MSRP is $60 to $70-ish, depending on your area. Which is interesting, because again, like the Obtainium is a single barrel, whereas the Old Carter is a batch, which doesn't necessarily warrant the extra price tag, but how many distilleries out there even have an American or light whiskey? It's probably only a handful that are actually distilling and aging American whiskey or light whiskey.
Well, we know MGP is producing for both Old Carter and Cat's Eye. They're one of the, honestly, shoot, is there any other distillery in America that is doing...
Penelope.
No, Penelope is sourcing. Penelope is sourcing their light whiskey from MGP.
Michter's has an American...
It is a whiskey aged in used barrels, most likely, for Michter's.
Yes.
So, not necessarily the same as light whiskey, but a good point. It's an American whiskey. So, I wonder why Michter's chooses to do that. Michter's has a rye, Michter's has a bourbon. Why does Michter's have an American whiskey? I've always wondered that. I mean, they've had that for a few years, if not more.
They've had that for a long time. It's probably because, again, you cannot, with American whiskey, you're basically aging the alcohol or the liquid in a used bourbon barrel.
Right.
So again, for someone like Michter's, you might as well basically take your used bourbon barrel and then age more of your alcohol or juice in it, and there you go, to make your light whiskey or American whiskey. Mm-hmm. And they probably water it down so much because, again, I think it's only $40 or $50 MSRP. Not like light whiskey or the Old Carter, which is a lot more expensive. But again, the question still stands is how many distilleries out there do a batch proof or barrel proof? I don't know of anybody besides you got Old Carter, you've got Obtainium, and you've got Penelope.
Is Nassif
NASA Family Reserve?
Yeah.
So that's the same company as Cat's Eye.
Cat's
Eye
does
okay.
Obtainium.
No, that's a good point. Because they are using that light whiskey in their NASA Family Reserve. So,
Okay.
so it's really interesting because, is it really just MGP that's distilling all the light whiskey right now?
Besides Michter's, I believe so. I don't know. Like I said, again,
Michter's doesn't call it light whiskey, but
they call it American.
Right. Which, I mean, to be fair, light whiskey was a term that was coined in the, I think it was 70s or 80s, when, vodka and, gin were, trending. So, they wanted a whiskey that was, an everybody's whiskey. So they wanted something that wasn't, as harsh, as bold as bourbon. They wanted something light, which, you use used barrels. It's hard to say. But when you do, you get a little bit of a lighter flavor, a little more of the vanilla, a little more of the sweet.
Yeah.
And at the time, they were releasing it low proof, but now we're seeing it at cask strength. And cask strength light whiskey goes beyond what we'd ever seen in cask strength bourbon. I mean, a lot of these are hazmat, right? They're over 140 proof, some of them.
Yes.
Both the ones we're drinking tonight, we have a 134.6 proof from Old Carter and a 142.2 on the Obtainium. So we are delving in very high proof whiskey here. So I feel like there's been a bit of a twist in the past, year or so with light whiskey. Why have whiskey drinkers come around to enjoying this? Why have we moved to this instead of bourbon? What do you guys think?
I think it's partially about the offering. What's interesting about that light whiskey specifically is that around 2009 or so, Seagram's sold to MGP. And at that time, they'd laid down an enormous amount of barrels for light whiskey for blending purposes. Mm-hmm. So those barrels sat around for quite some time, and now, from what I've heard at least, a large number of barrels in this brick house of what was considered light whiskey that's been sitting for much longer than originally intended. They originally intended to age for 8 to 10 years, I think. This is aged for 15 plus years. Most of the light whiskeys that I've come across have been, at least the Obtainiums, are 16 plus years. And I think that MGP started tasting them and thought, well, this stuff is fantastic. We can sell it as a single barrel.
Right.
Let's just do that. And they've been doing so. And that's how both Old Carter and this light whiskey essentially came about. So it's kind of fortunate in that the barrels were laid down and ignored, and it's kind of that not an orphan barrel story, but they were overlooked. They weren't used for Seagram's.
Right. I think my first experience with light whiskey was the Obtainium. You know, I had several different single barrels of it, and I was like, what is this? You know, it's so different from bourbon. You know, bourbon, you get like the oaky, the like really rich, like well-aged kind of notes. It's not as big and bold as like, you know, like a oaky kind of bomb that I expect from a bourbon, especially at 15 years old, but you're still getting that intensity of flavors. I mean, you get the high proof, you get the vanilla, you get the caramel, you get that like really sweet whiskey flavor. So it's really interesting that this new thing has caught on, and it's, you know, it's blowing up. I mean, Obtainium you see for, you know, $60 to $70, whereas Old Carter is bottling the same stuff as American whiskey, and it's going for what, 130-ish?
200.
Oof, up to 200. So
And that's MSRP.
it's obviously caught on. So we're going to do a little bit of a comparison here. Like I said, Brandon and I have done a flight where we blinded some Obtainium and some Old Carter. But tonight we know what we're drinking, so we're going to just like, you know, have a bit of a conversation with our friends here and see what we like out of each of these, because these are very different price points. So y'all ready to get into some whiskey?
Definitely.
Let's do it.
So we're going to start with the Old Carter here. Now this one is 134.6 proof, so it's a little bit lower proof. Age-wise, it is a 13-year, so it's very well aged. You said it's a batch versus a single barrel.
It is a batch. There is some obviously older age juice in it, so you got that going for you.
Well, let's go ahead and try that and keep the conversation going. Cheers, guys.
Boys.
Oh man.
You definitely get the proof on first sip.
Oh, absolutely.
Vanilla.
Yeah, but it's tons of sweetness up front too. Like we said, it's almost like
Vanilla
again,
sugar cookie.
Oh, to me, sugar cookie. I was thinking rock candy, like
Yes.
sugar,
Yeah.
crystal.
Yeah.
Very, very sweet.
Intermingled with vanilla.
Honestly, like I know we've been drinking a lot tonight, but I say this one is almost like a rum, like high proof rum.
I
Like
could
it's
see
very
that
sweet.
with the sweetness of it, which is funny because again, it's an American whiskey, like you said earlier. It's light, which it's light on all the flavors except for the vanilla, the caramel, but then the proof obviously does shine through.
Right.
But it's not that deep, dark, bold punch that a lot of bourbon drinkers are looking for.
Right. This doesn't have the oak.
It's to me, it's sweetness, but it's got complexity to it. At least this one does, but it's a different kind of complexity.
But I will say, if you're opposed to sweet, you may not like this.
Yes, I agree. This is a very sweet whiskey.
It is sweet.
If you don't like sweet, then this is not your jam. This shouldn't be for you.
That's what made me think it was rum. It's like it's not like molasses. It's more of just like a sugar cane. What are you guys getting on it?
For me, it's completely different from a regular bourbon. If I placed a bourbon side by side with this, I feel like I could tell the bourbon apart from this. This one's just amazingly sweet. And not in a bad way either. It's just the sweetness really stands apart, and you can feel that right away.
Mm-hmm. I mean, to be fair, that's really all you get is sweetness. There's really no fruit aspect to it. There's really not that much oak or barrel influence on it. It's just sweet in the alcohol.
If you're a whiskey fan, like you won't be opposed to this.
It also depends, but if it's too sweet.
Right,
if you don't like the sweet, then you're not going to like this. Doesn't matter, if you're a beer drinker or not.
I think it's definitely its own category.
For someone that's never had light whiskey, what would I relate it to the most? I'm like leaning like either Canadian. Okay, Canadian's hard to say because like we've had the privilege of trying Canadian at cask strength, which I think most people probably haven't had. Mm-hmm. For me personally, I think Canadian at cask strength is the closest thing to this.
I mean, like our Aaron said earlier, it's literally like you can go buy a Michter's American all day, every day at any store. Mm-hmm. It's that, but it's just turned up with the alcohol. So you basically take everything that Michter's American is and turn it up. Turn up the sweetness, turn up the vanilla, turn up the proof, and that's basically what you're getting with this Old Carter.
Yeah.
And to mention, Michter's American's like $40 or less.
That's what I'm saying. It's $40. It's all. It should be on every store shelf. It should be everywhere. It's easily obtainable.
Yeah.
So I would suggest getting that first. If you do enjoy it, and you want to take it to the next level, then you start looking for Obtainium or Old Carter if you want to put the money. But again, start small and work your way up.
Yeah. That Old Carter, what did you pay for that?
MSRP is $189 at least in California.
Okay. And the Obtainium, is this the one that I got for you?
Yeah. So I think it was $70. $69.99.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Something like that. Either way,
yeah.
Either way, it is probably approximately half price, give or take.
Right, and that one is a 15-year age-stated single barrel.
Yes.
Light whiskey. Now, I will say Old Carter has the brand reputation. I mean, Old Carter, they've done some... Brandon is the biggest fan of Old Carter. I haven't had much experience trying their stuff. I know Mark and Sherry have been doing a fantastic job with this brand. I know they have such a fan base. Brandon's one of them. What I've tried from them has been fantastic. So they built that reputation. So not only are they releasing a light whiskey, they are releasing a light whiskey that they have batched together. They have, this is what they're putting out. Like, hey, this is Old Carter batch 6 of their American whiskey. So they've kind of vetted that, as blenders. So they kind of set that. But Obtainium Light Whiskey, on the other hand, is a single barrel most of the time. Now, Cat's Eye, Gene Nassif is doing a fantastic job with that distillery. He's also putting out at, $70 or less. So let's see, that's a 13-year small batch. Let's try it compared to a 15-year single barrel and see how it does. Again, not that we're comparing, which one's the better buy, but it's interesting, like, conversation-wise, like, is this the future of American whiskey as we know it?
Because there's so many distilleries out there.
Or potentially an amazing alternative to bourbon that has to go into new virgin oak, right?
Because there was debate, should we remove the new oak requirement for bourbon? I personally disagree. We should not remove that.
Bourbon should always be new oak.
Exactly, which that's why this is an alternative, is because all these distilleries can, instead of selling their barrels to other countries or I guess alcohols, whether it be rum, whether it be vodka, whatever, like barrel aged, you might as well basically keep it for yourself and age American whiskey, because that's the only difference as far as I know, correct?
Yeah, let's try it. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, boys. Wow.
That's so good. You know it's good.
I know it's good, and to me it drinks hot. Like, this drinks way hotter.
To me it doesn't.
Than American.
To me it doesn't. To me it drinks proof-wise about the same. To me it has body. This has body and this has character.
I agree with you. I love the body in this, and as I've commented on, I love that, like, viscosity because I like good whiskey with good cigar. So,
oh my gosh, yeah, that would hold up.
Pairing wise, I think the Obtainium, actually, I would prefer it with cigar.
It's so thick. It's like so viscous.
There's more vanilla, and sweetness on the Old Carter American.
Agreed.
But the viscosity and mouthfeel on the Obtainium is unctuous.
What is the proof on this again?
Ooh, it's hot. It's 71.1%.
142.2.
To me, that it doesn't taste that.
Well, what's interesting is that the Old Carter American
That's
batch
crazy.
4 was higher proof than batch 6. So batch 4 was 139.6. But to me, it drinks like this 134.6. To me, it's incredible the difference in the palate, personally. I know you guys don't feel the same because I'm the odd man out, which, whatever, like, it is what it is. But the American's more complex, but I don't know if that's just because I'm swayed by Old Carter being blenders, or if it's because it's also a blended product versus a single barrel. Because how many single barrel products, whether it's American whiskey, bourbon, rye, whatever, how many single barrel products have that kind of deep, dark, bold, complex flavors in a single barrel versus a batch?
In my opinion, that's an amazing, like, conversation topic. Can you get an enormous amount of complexity without blending?
Yes.
I will say yes. But I will also say there's an absolute art and talent to blending. I don't want to dismiss that. I think, being a blender, I mean, Old Carter, Barrel, all these other brands that do the blending, they're extremely talented. They know what they're looking for with their flavor profile. They're really skilled, for sure. I just think, looking at this Obtainium Light Whiskey, this is a single barrel. Now, that's not to say it's just a random single barrel. It could be a select that they choose to bottle. They know this is, like, legit stuff. Something about this, to me, is superior, and that's just my opinion. I you know what, I've not had much Old Carter. Brandon, you've thankfully given me every sample of Old Carter I've ever had. But this Obtainium, just to me, is just shiny, and it continues to impress me, whether we're doing it blind or we're doing it right now. I mean, what do you guys, Juan and Aaron, what are your thoughts on Obtainium or Old Carter?
At first, I didn't know what to think about the light whiskey. I thought that light whiskey, was going to be not that impressive, as if, maybe that the fact that it's not bourbon and, the fact that it's usually blended. But on its own, it's pretty amazing, especially at the price point that it's at. It's affordable. You get a high proof whiskey that you can essentially watered down to whatever level you'd like. It would probably stand up to an ice cube, and so you can definitely make it last. You're kind of getting your best bang for your buck with this. So I'm pretty impressed, and I want to see what light whiskey will evolve into.
Absolutely. What about you, Aaron?
So the rumor that I heard is that basically a majority of these light whiskey casks, at least from MGP, are gone. So
great.
Yeah,
wow.
Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see much more of at least these styles.
Don't tell them that. Don't tell them that. Then they'll buy it all up and we can't buy it anymore. Just kidding.
Fair enough. But I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Comparison-wise, between the two that we're drinking right now, I think that Old Carter is like a wonderful, sweet, vanilla sugar cookie kind of character, and I think anyone that potentially could enjoy a whiskey would like this. Mm-hmm. I think that the Obtainium, it's a little bit hotter, but there's a little bit more character. It's kind of splitting here. So I really enjoy both.
Yeah. Well, great point. I mean, I think the future of whiskey is, up in the air. We're all just going to have our speculation of what's going to be trendy. I hope light whiskey continues to catch on. I mean, I think Cat's Eye's doing a fantastic job. Old Carter is doing a brilliant job at blending it. But I think light whiskey as a category should not be ignored, and it can be really fantastic when done well. So I'm really excited to see what's to come from other light whiskeys. I hope there's more of it. And Brandon, thank you so much for sharing these with us. I enjoyed them both. I'm still a sucker for Obtainium. That's my jam. But Old Carter, just as blenders, Sherry and Mark are just doing a fantastic job. So cheers to y'all. Thank you so much for this conversation, and I'm looking forward to chatting more about it. Cheers, y'all.
Cheers.
Cheers.